solid season as a team where they finished 8-9. But the big question mark that continues to sort of plague the Colts is that quarterback position, mainly Anthony Richardson. Will he be their future quarterback? Can he be a franchise quarterback? A question that has yet to be answered as of now, and we'll see what happens in this upcoming season. So let's preview the Indianapolis Colts for this upcoming season. Starting off with their major additions and losses from this offseason. Starting on offense, or starting with the additions, they bring in Daniel Jones, Tyler Warren. I don't know how to pronounce his last name, but JT, pass rusher from Ohio State. Neville Gallimore, Cam Bynum, and Charvarius Ward are their notable additions, guys that either should see a lot of playing time or could in the case of Daniel Jones. And their primary losses include Joe Flacco, Will Fries, Mark Lewinsky, Ryan Kelly, Dayo Odeyingbo, Taven Bryan, EJ Speed, Grant Stewart, and Julian Blackmon. And the key pieces that, were starters or played a lot for them were Joe Flacco, Lewinsky, Kelly, Odeyingbo, Speed, and Blackmon. Fries only played 5 games, but he was injured. But nonetheless, he's a very good player for him. So going more into the additions, they obviously bring in Daniel Jones. They paid him $14 million, but that's just because he's a quarterback. They only paid him for 1 year, bringing him in from the Giants. Well, actually, he got traded to the Vikings, I believe, and now he's signed. But he didn't play with the Vikings at all, and now he's signed with the Colts. He had about 2,000 yards, 8 touchdowns, and 7 picks in 10 games with the Colts. And then he also ran for about 250 and 2 more touchdowns. But again, just like Anthony Richardson, how he is sort of yet to be figured out as how good he can be in the NFL, Daniel Jones is kind of in a similar boat. He's had some success when they made the playoffs, and when they won, then when they beat the Vikings and Kirk Cousins. But outside of that, it hasn't been the best for Daniel Jones. The reason I have him here is because I do think it'll be a battle between him and Anthony Richardson. I think Richardson is the bigger story, and I think he has the better chance to be the starter. But nonetheless, I think Daniel Jones will either be a backup for the Colts or see some playing time at some point. So I think that's why I kind of put him as an addition. Then we have the 2 rookies in Tyler Warren and JT. Tyler Warren, their first-round pick, tight end out of Penn State. Actually was not the first tight end taken, which I thought he was, but that ended up being Colston Loveland. But I really like Tyler Warren out of Penn State, can kind of do a lot of different things at the tight end position, or was used in a lot of ways at least, at Penn State. And during the offseason, I really wanted the Colts to end up with Tyler Warren. I thought that would be a very good fit for them because the rest of their offense, at least skill position-wise, outside of their quarterback, is kind of set. You have Jonathan Taylor. You have a very good young receiver core, which we'll get into later. And you were just missing that tight end, and now you have it in Tyler Warren. Unfortunately, you lost some O-line pieces, which we'll get into in a little bit. But I think Tyler Warren was that missing piece, at least in the skill position room. So that's why I really like the fit for him in Indianapolis, and he ended up falling to them. So I love that pick. JT out of Ohio State, they needed some pass rush help, especially with the loss of Dayo Odeyingbo. Dayo signed with the Bears in free agency for about $48 million over 3 years. I mean, in 14 starts, he had 3 sacks, 30 tackles, 2 forced fumbles. He is only 25 years old. I'm pretty sure this is his first contract outside of his rookie deal. So it does obviously hurt to lose a guy like Odeyingbo. I think that's how you pronounce his name. But I feel like JT is a solid guy to get in the second round because there is a very deep pass rush class. So I think to get a guy in that second round, because I love the Tyler Warren pick, so I don't think they needed to go edge there. But I love how they went edge in the second to try to fill that spot. They bring in Neville Gallimore, who played with the Rams last year. They got him on a 1-year cheap deal. He's 28 years old. He only started 4 games with the Rams, didn't really do too much. But I think he's one of their top 3 or 4 D tackles in terms of depth chart as of now. So that's why I put him as an addition. And then their 2 big additions, honestly, were Cam Bynum and Charvarius Ward. They bring Cam Bynum in from Minnesota, gave him 4 years, $60 million. They bring in Ward from San Francisco for 3 years, $54 million. Cam Bynum had a very good season with Minnesota, and he did more than just all those touchdown celebrations. He had 3 interceptions, 96 tackles, 10 pass deflections, 2 fumble recoveries, and he's only 27. So he's kind of your Julian Blackmon replacement. Blackmon, he is still a free agent. So, I don't know if... I think since he hasn't been signed yet that he's probably not going to go back to the Colts. But he had 86 tackles, 4 pass deflections. He started 16 games for the Colts last year. So him and Bynum are somewhat similar in terms of, production and talent. I take Cam Bynum a little bit above Blackmon, but not by much. They're very similar, so that's kind of an even split there. And then Charvarius Ward. Now, last year, in 12 games, he had 54 tackles, and I don't think he got an interception. But in his last full season, healthy season, I don't even know if he was injured, because I think he had all those personal issues. But the last season he played all the games, he had 72 tackles, 5 interceptions, 23 pass deflections, 1 forced fumble. He made the Pro Bowl, and he was an all-pro second team. So when he played every game, he was one of the best corners in the league. And if you can get that production out of him as well as Cam Bynum, and you add that on top of their other secondary players, which we'll get to, I think that was a huge addition. So overall, I really like the additions they made. Tyler Warren, great pick. JT, great pick. Gallimore, he can just be a decent D tackle. They have pretty good D tackles, so he can just be solid depth. And then I love the Bynum and Ward pickups. Then Daniel Jones is just a backup quarterback. And on the loss side, they did lose Joe Flacco, but they bring in Daniel Jones, and Joe Flacco is very old. Will Fry, the lineman trio of losses they had with Fries, Kelly, and Glowinski is tough. Will Fries, again, as I said before, he didn't really play much for them. I think he only played like 5 games. But nonetheless, he's still really good. He signed a 5-year, $87 million deal with the Vikings. And they also lost Ryan Kelly to the Vikings as well. He had a very good season last year with the Colts at the center position. He signed a 2-year, $18 million, because I think he's 30, so he's on the older side. Will Fries, I think he's around like 26, 27, not 100% sure. So to lose those 2 guys, as well as a good depth piece in Mark Glowinski, he's still a free agent as well, like Julian Blackmon, so maybe they bring him back. But again, I think since it's this late in the offseason, you wouldn't bring a guy back. But so it will be tough for them to replace those guys. We'll talk about their current linemen that they do have. And then Taven Bryan, he didn't really play much for them. And then you lose EJ Speed to the Texans. He had 1 pick, 142 tackles, 5 pass deflections in 15 starts. And then Grant Stewart also didn't really play too much for them, at least towards the end of the year. He wasn't like an end-of-year starter for them. So those are mainly their additions and losses. Outside of the O-line, I think they did pretty well. You bring in Tyler Warren, you replace Odiengbo with JT, you replace Blackmon with Bynum, and you add one of the better corners in Cam Ward. And then I think Gallimore's a slight upgrade over Taven Bryan as well. So overall, outside of the O-line, I think they did pretty good in their offseason, at least in terms of like starters. We'll get to other players later. Looking at their offense as a whole, obviously the big question is Anthony Richardson. In his 11 games last year, he had 1,800 passing yards, 500 rushing yards. His touchdown interceptions was 8-12, so that's not good. But he also had 6 touchdowns on the ground because he's one of the better running quarterbacks, especially in those short yardage situations. But again, that is the big key here for the Colts. They obviously bring in Daniel Jones. They also drafted Riley Leonard to potentially compete with Richardson. I think Richardson will get the job. But he doesn't have, if he does get the job, I don't think he has, I wouldn't expect him to have much of a, much room to get away with like mistakes. Like, I think as soon as you see a stretch of games where he doesn't play that good, I think they won't hesitate to put Daniel Jones in. Last year, their total offense was 17th in scoring, so about average. They didn't have the best passing offense, obviously led by Anthony Richardson and an old Joe Flacco, but they had a great rushing offense led by, as well, Anthony Richardson, but mainly Jonathan Taylor, who had 1,400 yards, 11 touchdowns. He had over 4.5 yards per carry as well. He also caught a touchdown too. We all know about Jonathan Taylor and what he can do. Khalil Herbert, who they bring in to be one of their backups behind Jonathan Taylor, was on Chicago for a long time. I think they traded him to Cincinnati at the deadline. He honestly didn't do too much last year, so we'll see what he can do as the Colts backup. They had Trey Sermon, I believe, last year, and he played pretty decent as the backup to Taylor, so hopefully they can get something out of Herbert. Their starting O-line honestly was very good in terms of like sacks allowed last year. They only allowed 14 sacks last year. And that's the guys that are currently projected to be the starters, not including last year's guys. So Bernard Rainman, Quentin Nelson, Bordeloni, Goncalves, and Braden Smith. Those guys, now some of them didn't play a ton because of Will Fries, Kelly, and Glowinski being the main guys last year. So some of these guys didn't play. But overall, pretty solid O-line last year. We'll see how they can take the damage of losing those three guys. Again, Glowinski was more of a depth piece, but Fries and Kelly in particular, big losses for the Colts. So we'll see if the interior O-line outside of Quentin Nelson, because we know what you're going to get out of Quentin Nelson, we'll see if those guys can step up, because that's, I think, the big question mark for their offense. And my favorite part of this Colts offense is their young receiver core they have with Alec Pierce, Michael Pittman, Josh Downs, Adonai Mitchell. Those four alone are all super young and have either shown a lot or either have done a lot or shown a little bit of flashes. Alec Pierce had about 800 yards, 7 touchdowns, only on 37 catches. He was Anthony Richardson's big, deep target. He's only 24 years old. He's the second oldest of those four. But yeah, he was their big, deep threat guy every time Anthony Richardson threw the ball super far, which he obviously is great at. It was always to Alec Pierce. Then you got Michael Pittman. He is on the older side at 27, but he had 800 yards, 3 touchdowns, just under 70 catches. Josh Downs, who I think is the best receiver on the team, at least last year he was. Mainly when Flacco came in, though. I feel like when Flacco was the quarterback, that's when you really saw Josh Downs. But he had 800 yards, 3 touchdowns. Or no, he had 800 yards, 5 touchdowns, just over 70 catches, and he's only 23 years old. And then you had Adonai Mitchell, their second-round pick from last year, who people thought could have went low in the first, but he fell. He didn't get a ton of usage, only 55 targets, but he did catch 23 of those, had 300 yards. He's only 22 years old. So I think with what you've seen from Pittman, what you've seen from Downs, what you've seen from Pierce, and then the flashes that you saw out of Adonai Mitchell, this is one of the better young receiver cores, I think. They just haven't had that quarterback play to really maximize their talent, and which is why this whole offense is sort of depending on Anthony Richardson to take that next step, because if he can, I think this offense can really take off. I just don't know if he can. I still want him to. I still believe in Anthony Richardson. He just still has to show it for me. But if he can, you add his running ability, Jonathan Taylor, and all these other weapons, these pass catchers, because they still have Mo Alley Cox, Jelani Woods, Drew Ogletree. Not bad backup tight ends to a guy like Tyler Warren. So I really like this Colts offense. It's sort of a wait and see type of offense for me. Now moving on to their defense. Their defense was a little bit worse in scoring than their offense was. 24th in the league, allowed just under 430 points. And they kind of had a below average defense, hence the 24th in scoring. Like their pass defense and their run defense were both pretty below average. But I do think they can improve this year. First, honestly, looking at their secondary, we already talked about the two guys they brought in Charvarius Ward and Cam Bynum. They still have Kenny Moore, one of the better nickel corners in football. He had 3 interceptions last year, 7 pass deflections. We know what you're going to get out of Kenny Moore. And then there's the other two guys of Jalen Jones and Nick Cross, at least in terms of starters. Nick Cross, he's only 23 years old. They drafted him in 2022. He had 3 interceptions, five pass deflections, forced fumble, 146 tackles. So Nick Cross at safety next to Cam Bynum had a very good year. And then Jalen Jones, he's only 22 years old because he's their 7th round pick and he's now starting. But he had 2 picks, 100 tackles, 12 pass deflections. So for a 7th round pick, Jalen Jones had a very good season last year. So you have Nick Cross, who's 23, Jalen Jones, who's 22, Kenny Moore, who's 29, Cam Bynum, who is 27, and then Charvarius Ward, he is 30, but he's still really good. That's a very good young secondary. And honestly, despite their pass defense being below average, their deep passes, like 40-plus, they only allow 10 40-plus completions, which is tied for 3rd. But completions that are on the shorter end or like 20-plus yards, around that range, they were in the top 10. So they still weren't bad, but they were pretty good in terms of like deep passes. So I do think their secondary played quite well last year, and it's a young secondary. And they added 2 of the better free agents that are in the secondary in Bynum and Ward. So I think this secondary is going to be the best part of this team because they were 7th in interceptions last year, and you just added 2 guys that can take the ball away. Now where the weaknesses lie a little bit, I think, is their front 7. I still think it can be good, but I don't think it will be as good as their secondary. Last year they had 36 total sacks, which was around 25th. It's not as young either, their D-line. You got Kwity Paye, who they drafted in 2021. He had 8 sacks last year, 41 tackles. Latu Latu, not the greatest rookie season that you want out of your first-round pick edge rusher with 4 sacks. He did have 3 forced fumbles, but 4 sacks, 32 tackles. Not the best rookie season, but I still think there's something there with Latu Latu. You obviously bring in JT out of Ohio State, as we mentioned. And then their D tackles, they're good. They're just older. You got Grover Stewart, who's 31 years old. He has 74 tackles, 3.5 sacks. DeForest Buckner, he's 30 years old, 6.5 sacks, 60 tackles. Again, Neville Gallimore, who they bring in from the Rams, didn't do a ton last year. So I think that this D-line group is really going to determine how this defense plays next year, because I think the secondary can be one of the better young secondaries in the league. And I think it really can they stop the run and can they generate pressure. Their linebackers, honestly, not that bad. You got Jalen Carles, their 5th-round pick from last year. I mean, he had an okay season. Nothing special. But Zaire Franklin, obviously, is one of the better linebackers in the league. Last year, he had 2 interceptions, 173 tackles, 6 pass deflections, 5 forced fumbles. Also made Pro Bowl and All-Pro second team. But he did it last year. So we all know we're going to get out of Zaire Franklin. They don't have a lot of depth outside of him. So I think that front 7 is going to be what makes or breaks the Colts defense, because I really like their secondary. So I think their defense will improve. I don't think it'll be below average. I think it'll be about average. And again, the whole team's success really rides on, I feel, Anthony Richardson and his development, or I guess something you see out of Daniel Jones. Quickly going over their special teams. Their kicker, Spencer Schrader. He didn't play. He played for a lot of teams last year, but in total, in his 4 games, he went 5 for 5 from field goals, 9 for 9 from extra point. And last year, they were pretty bad in return yards, so we'll see maybe if Khalil Herbert can add on to that special teams. And then Rigoberto Sanchez, one of the better punters in the league. I mean, I think it'll be a decent special team. I think Schrader's pretty young, too, so he should get better. And maybe the fact that he's on the team to start the year and if he can play all games with the Colts, he could be pretty good for them. Now, going on to their record prediction, floor and ceiling, because it varies, because their success varies a lot in what the quarterbacks are going to do. I think their floor and ceiling is going to be also, I think they could have a lot of wins or not a lot of wins. And their schedule is kind of tough too in certain aspects. So for their floor, I think they can beat a team like the Raiders. I think they can get 1 or 2 division wins. And then I think they could either beat like the Dolphins or the Steelers if they don't get Rodgers. So I think if the quarterback play is not doing well, I think their floor is around 4 wins. I don't think it's very high. But I do think their ceiling can be very high if Anthony Richardson puts it all together. I think they can get 3 or 4 division wins. They could beat the Cardinals. They could beat the Jags. They could beat a team like the Seahawks. They could beat a team like the Falcons. And I think their ceiling is around 8 wins. That's what they had last year. But you had pretty consistent quarterback play from Joe Flacco, just solid veteran quarterback play. But now you have 2 younger quarterbacks in Jones and Richardson who have been up and down. So that's why I think I don't think they have as high of a ceiling just because of the unpredictability of their quarterbacks. And that leads my prediction to about 6 wins for the Colts. Not only does their quarterback play a question mark, but I don't know what their O-line's going to do because they lost all those key guys on the O-line. You still have Braden Smith, you still have Quentin Nelson, but they had a lot of solid guys you could rely on. Now I'm not quite sure about that. So I think even if the quarterback play is pretty good, there's a chance the O-line play isn't as consistent or isn't as good, which obviously doesn't help a quarterback, especially a quarterback who hasn't put it all together like Richardson and Jones. So I do think they could have a decent amount of wins or not a lot of wins at the same time. That will conclude our preview for the Indianapolis Colts. If you enjoyed the video, make sure to leave a like, subscribe if you're new, and please subscribe. I'm trying to get 500 subscribers, so I'd really appreciate it if you hit that subscribe button. It doesn't take too long, and I'll see you guys next time. Peace.